Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Deborah Pinkerton. Welcome to Morning Light. It was a late night last night.
Sure
Penn
was.
State football game. Sorry
Next
for
year,
them.
always next year.
Yeah, tough loss for them for sure. Well, in just a moment, our Morning Light panel will go behind the headlines. But first, here's a preview of what's coming up later in the show. Having an estate plan is one of the most important things you can do for your loved ones. But this is a task many Americans put off dealing with until later in life. I talked with a Christian financial advisor to discuss why you should start the process early and what documents you will need. And from estate planning to funeral planning, losing a loved one is always very difficult. A Pennsylvania funeral director shares how his faith helps grieving families in their journey of comfort and healing.
Look, and I know some people might want to tune out and say, I can't deal with that topic. But when you're a believer, when you're a follower of Christ, you are confronting these heavy topics with a heavy dose of hope, for sure.
That is right.
Well, as wildfires rage in California this week, killing at least 10 people, that number is expected to climb. A partisan social media fight is erupting over who's to blame. President-elect Donald Trump is calling on California's governor, to resign, as some 180,000 Angelenos have been ordered to evacuate and hundreds of homes and cars burn. A well-known pastor, Greg Laurie of Harvest Community Church, is asking for prayer to help contain the fires. But the church has also created a harvest relief fund to deliver immediate aid to their neighbors, working with organizations like Samaritan's Purse. So are moments like this, these hard, difficult moments, a way for America's national leaders to revive an old tradition of calling for prayer in times of national crisis, especially during events we might call acts of God?
Yeah, well, we certainly are praying for everyone there. It's just unbelievable what's taking place.
It's like a movie in so
Yeah,
many ways.
really.
Yeah.
Well, many presidents were Bible readers. John Quincy Adams and William Henry Harrison kept a 5 a.m. appointment with the Bible. Harry Truman read it cover to cover before age 12, and George W. Bush started his day with Scripture. While millions of Americans see value in reading the Bible, many others are intimidated. So we will ask our panel about how to start and maintain this transformational life habit. And I know that the pastor of my church, he is really encouraging us to read the entire Bible throughout the year, and he has a plan. He has different ways that you can do it.
I started to do that with an audio Bible every year. And it makes it a lot easier early morning hours, for sure. And on this day, January 10, 1776, Thomas Paine became an overnight success by creating America's first viral moment with the publication of a 47-page pamphlet. It was the colony's grievance against the British monarchy. An estimated 20% of American colonists owned a copy of Common Sense, a call to a distinct American identity apart from the British. But nearly 250 years later, passionate tweets or posts seem to rule the day. That's the way we argue. Have we lost the ability to make arguments that persuade? We'll take these questions to the Morning Light panel this morning. Cynthia, Lyons, thank you for being here. You were up late watching that football game.
I was. I'd fallen asleep, and then towards the end, I woke up.
I would love to see what that looks like in your home and the morning process. But
yes.
Yeah. Scott?
It's very good.
Welcome back. This is now your second day as a official legislator.
Yes.
People calling you about potholes yet?
No, not potholes, but lots of well wishes right now and boxes of chocolate, which I don't need, delivered to my office.
Chocolate and flowers usually rule the day.
Yeah.
So the wildfires are something that, look, we are so far removed from California. Many of us have relatives. I have an aunt and uncle who gave us an update last night. But it is almost unbelievable when you're seeing the scenes there. In moments of national crisis, we've talked a lot about President Carter this week, when he brought Sadat and Begin together for those peace talks, he asked the country to pray. It seems a little strange, though, because we haven't heard President Obama, we haven't heard President Biden, we certainly have not yet to hear President Trump ask the country in a specific way to pray. First, let me show you a little clip from Greg Laurie, who's the pastor there, who kind of gets this balance right. We're praying, but we're also doing. Here's Greg.
So, what should we do? Pray. Pray for these firefighters. Pray for their protection. Pray that God watches over them. I wish the Lord would just extend his hand like he did on the Sea of Galilee and say, peace be still, because the winds are stirring this up, and we need it to stop. But we need to step into this situation. So we've created the Harvest Relief Funds for situations exactly like this. If you would like to send some support to help people in need, you just go to our website, harvest.org/relief.
So, I mean, this is a practical way, but we used to do something called a National Day of Humiliation and Prayer. We did it at different junctures. When we went into World War II, FDR called for this many, many times, during the Great Depression, other times. We don't do it now. Are we too sophisticated for a president to ask for that kind of help from God?
I think we are too prone to politicizing events like these for our own gain. We want to use it as leverage to further our own agenda, instead of looking first at the victims and how can we help them, and then maybe at the larger question of justice. When we see people suffering like this, we want to blame somebody. Someone has to be to blame for this, right? And we feel like something needs to be done.
Put them on trial in social media.
Something should. And so we're lashing out for that kind of stuff. And there is a need for justice in these kind of, we want to see it happen.
Right.
It should happen. But I think first and foremost, we think about the victims. We want to reach out to the victims, help them, and then have to me, a balanced view of what is justice. What makes this right? How can we make these people whole? Instead of just looking for retribution, which is not the same thing as justice.
You've been thinking about this as well.
Well, yeah, because, aren't we taught that this is a time for prayer? These are the times when people look at these devastations and these photos of what's happening on the West Coast or what happened a few years ago in Hawaii. And don't we then fall on our knees? Sometimes we miss it when our days are great days. But these are times that are calling for prayer, daily prayer for these people in our homes, and it really
Cynthia,
is something. But you're right, it's politicized, and that makes it hard.
I hear people out there saying, yes, but heads have to roll, and we have to hold these people. The idea of justice, but the idea of God actually controlling the winds, or controlling the outcome of the fire, the water supply, and all that. We're reaching points in the country where we're desperate, really, for God to intervene, aren't we?
Well, and again, you see these broadcasts of people going, "I don't have a toothbrush."
Right.
And yet we're sending blame on, State Farm, who's saying, I don't know that I can cover it.
Right.
And that's what makes it really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing, we talked about President Carter this week.
Yeah.
He would open his Bible
Yeah.
and then move forward from there. What is next?
Two fires, it seems, we have to control this week. The fires of gossip and rumor and innuendo, and then the actual wildfires. Bible reading is a habit that we learned, of course, this week. President Carter every day read the Bible with Rosalind. In Spanish and in English was the passage for their habit. Many, many presidents, so this is not an isolated case, have done this as you look into their habits. But people that are watching, I know, are intimidated by the idea because of maybe the these and the thous, or, my grandmother made me read that. So it feels like take your medicine, and this is what old people do, they read the Bible. But how have you found the Bible to transform your lives, and what would it look like to have a plan to go through the whole year? Scott?
Well, I love the idea of a discipline. Whether it comes to physical exercise,
Right.
discipline is good. Spiritual exercise, daily prayer, Bible reading, good for the soul. I will not debate that. But to me, what I found to be most transformative is when from time to time, you will have a passage, let's call it, it's a little bit dry. It's like shredded wheat, dry but nourishing, right? It doesn't really scratch you where you itch. But then
long list of names and numbers,
names
right?
and genealogies and these things. But every once in a while, we'll find a passage that hits us where it matters. And what I've encouraged people to do when I was a pastor is spend as much effort trying to live out that teaching daily, instead of just trying to get the quantity of the verses. I need to read my 15 verses today or whatever. That's good for discipline. But when you find a passage that's challenging to you personally, live it out. What does it look like for me to live this passage out at my school, at my workplace, with my spouse? That, to me, is where the power of Scripture begins to transform someone's life.
I love that. Cynthia?
Well, and we had talked earlier, as much as we sort of downplay social media or stay off your phones or the computer, just do it. There's a lot of apps out there that we spend a lot of time in the car. We spend, times at practice.
Free.
The Bible app is
Yeah.
free, and it walks you through your daily Bible reading. And it's really, really helpful. Coming from one that, is not great. I have my morning meditations that I do.
Yeah.
But without that discipline that you talked about,
Because we're so
it's hard.
busy.
Yeah.
And it's easy to, in the busyness of life, forget the important things that are good for us. We know that they're good for us, but, we get distracted.
So I found this Bible, reading Bible. It was people like Samuel L. Jackson and other big readers. It's called the Bible Experience. And it puts music behind it. So even those genealogies aren't boring. Anniversary of Common Sense. It was to use this metaphor, it's the spark that set off a revolution and was really America's first viral moment when 20% of the populace was reading this screed against the British monarchy. But it was a detailed argument. I don't know, Cynthia, that we could sit down and read 47 pages before we go and argue. It seems like we immediately say, here's the event, who's to blame? The firefighters, the governor, the president, whatever, hit send. Do you think there's a way to dial it back and have common sense kinds of arguments again in today's culture?
Well, as you know, I have a coffee clatch that I go to with a group of retired gentlemen, and we spend, when I am there, mornings having all types of different discussion from all types of different backgrounds and different thought processes.
You have a hidden camera the next time you meet there?
It is one of my biggest blessings, I have to say, and I'm very, very blessed.
Do you all agree on
But
things?
No,
Okay.
not at all. But we have, because there's conversations. There's conversations about it. And we agree to disagree on certain things. But we do miss that, I think, in today's society, because people get mad right away.
So you're going into the longest serving constitutional legislative body in the Western world since the 1600s.
Yes.
Are you ready for debate, and do you think you can actually find debate, or is everyone playing to the cameras? What do you think?
I hope so, and I think that I hate to use the word tactic, but an approach, let's use that word, an approach that served me well when I was a pastor was that if you want to have meaningful dialogue that could be potentially persuasive, you have to first start with an attitude where I am willing to be persuaded. If you're not willing to be persuaded, it's really hard to persuade someone because you're not listening to them. You're not understanding their argument. You're not listening to their concerns or what they think the best solution is. So if you are already starting a discussion by I am unpersuadable, you're likely not going to persuade the person
It's
you're
almost
talking
like
to.
put the post and say, prove me.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
Absolutely.
A good way to start that. And a good way to start the weekend as we catch up with friends and relatives who maybe have different thoughts about all of the events of this week. So thank you both for making time to be on the panel. Let's thank our Morning Light panel for joining us this week. They've been great. Coming up next on Morning Light, nearly half of Americans don't have an estate planning document like a will. But as a Christian, it's important to plan early. Deborah talked with our Morning Light Good Money contributor on how to start the process. You're watching Morning Light on Lighthouse TV.
It's a topic many people do not want to discuss, creating a plan for what happens if we become incapacitated or die. An estate plan is an important part of being a good steward of what the Lord has given us. Earlier, I spoke with Christian financial advisor Tim Slothower. He explains which important documents will serve as the foundation of your estate plan in our Good Money segment. Tim, let's talk about estate planning. Why is this so important?
An estate plan establishes how things will be handled when we either die, become incapacitated, or need end-of-life care. So having an estate plan is an important part of our stewardship responsibility. If we don't have a plan, then someone else makes decisions that you may or may not agree with. And it also becomes much more expensive because it can end up in court. Really, an estate plan is the only way for your wishes to be met. And when we think about it, nobody really likes to discuss this. It's not a pleasant topic. Only 32% of Americans have an estate plan, but 100% of us will die unless the Lord returns first. So it's something that we need to take seriously as we consider our stewardship responsibility.
Now, are there some documents that you need to look into or prepare?
Yes, there's three main documents that serve as the core of a basic estate plan. The first is a will, which outlines who will care for your minor children. Those are children that are under the age of 18, if you have them, and also where the assets that the Lord has entrusted to you will go when you pass away. The second document is called a power of attorney. And if you were to become incapacitated, say via an accident or an illness, it allows for someone else to use the assets that you have to pay your bills. And the final one is a living will, which is if you were to need end-of-life care, this document enables you to appoint someone to make those health decisions on your behalf.
So these are pretty important documents. So what are some practical considerations when really creating them?
Yeah, so one of the key areas is you want to talk to the people who you are going to put in the position of executor or power of attorney before you draft the documents. Someone shouldn't be finding out after you die or become incapacitated that they serve in that capacity, because you want to make sure they can serve and are willing to do that. The next is to really get organized. Store your documents in a secure place. Create a list of accounts and contact information so that if something does happen to you, that your power of attorney or executor doesn't have to go on a scavenger hunt through your house to try and figure out where things are and what accounts you had. Consider listing 2 agents, so you could have 2 executors and 2 power of attorneys. Only one would act at a time, but if you pick someone from a younger generation, then that enables you to not have to redo the document, hopefully, if they both continue to be willing to serve in that capacity. And the last one is to talk with financial institutions about power of attorneys, because the way they get applied are very different across organizations. So it's important to understand how they'll handle it at that time.
So we've heard about named beneficiaries and your will. What is that, and what is the difference?
Yeah, it's a great question. So named beneficiaries in your will are 2 different categories. A named beneficiary would apply to a specific account or policy. So for example, your retirement plan at work, your IRA account, life insurance policies, or annuities, all of them, when you started them, were given a form that allowed you to establish beneficiaries. It's very easy to change or update them down the road, but whatever is on that form is the way that that particular account or policy will be distributed upon your passing. A will covers everything else. Think about like your house, your possessions, your car, etc. And all of those assets go via the will. And to get a will updated, you need to go to an attorney. So it's important to keep in mind that there is a different way to establish that those beneficiaries as well as establish the will. As you're kind of creating your estate plans, you want to make sure that's unified. And you want to review those documents periodically because life circumstances may change and your executor who you were hoping to serve in that capacity may pass away or not be able to do that. And then you need to update those documents so that they reflect your wishes at that time.
Thank you, Tim, for having this conversation with us. Like you said, many people may not want to discuss it, but it's something that does need to be discussed, does need to be planned out. We certainly thank you for this.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. For more information about estate planning, check out gracefinancialadvisors.com. Coming up next on Morning Light, from estate planning to funeral planning, mourning the loss of a loved one is never easy. But a Christian funeral can serve as a way to help believers and non-believers alike reflect on their own eternity. I asked a Pennsylvania funeral director why it is important for families to hold a funeral ceremony. A growing number of people are rejecting formal funeral services, but as Christians, we believe death is not the end, but a transition to a new life with God. I sat down with Pennsylvania coroner and funeral director Graham Hetrick to find out how his faith helps families walk through the stages of grief. Graham, you have been a funeral director for many years. This is such really a difficult time for families when they're going through this. How do you help them through their grief?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that they go through a very specific grieving sequence. And we see this, and there's a reason why man has created ceremony around death. And I never really understood this until I started to do graduate work in psychology. And the first reading that I had on stages of grief was, and I recommend it to everybody, especially if they have a family is going through grief or has a hospice situation or even older parents, so you can figure out what you have to do when that ultimate day comes. I learned so much from my father's death, mainly because he was a Christian, a strong Christian. It has been my exposure to death that has increased my reliance on the Lord, because I know that's what's important.
How do you keep your faith prevalent during the service?
It varies from the timeline, because we're really taking them through a journey or a process. But there is life after death. So you want to prepare for that. So that's the one thing. At the beginning, we're taking them through the stages, which are, I can't believe Harry died. I just can't believe it. Well, he's on hospice care. But it's still an unbelievable thing. It's too big to conceive. Then there's anger. Well, why are you here? You're the coroner, or why weren't you here quicker? And then the third thing is bargaining. I had a little old lady, her husband was probably in his 90s, and she's sitting in front of me, and we're making funeral arrangements. And she says, Graham, tell me. She says, do you think if I would have given Harry less bacon, that he would have lived longer? That's bargaining in the past tense. Now, by the way, if you're just told that you have stage 4 breast cancer or something like that, you go through these same cycles. And then from there, you have resolution. But you have to take them through each one of these stages. And the value of a funeral service is that you help this person walk through those stages. Almost every funeral home now has the ability to put on a TV screen all the old pictures, and have you seen that when you go to funerals? That is so therapeutic, because it's saying the glass is half full. The other half will be fulfilled by God.
How has being a coroner really strengthened your faith?
Because it only reconfirms that man consists of a body, a mind, a soul, a spirit. That's the most important thing I've learned from this, because what we know, whether we're an atheist, as a matter of fact, I've talked with atheists and they say a moral law that is known by all exists. Well, man can't be just some collection of a mystic mud puddle somewhere and all things generated from that, and there's no intelligence design. That's like saying, well, I got a computer, but if you don't have a database with a designer, your computer is worthless. So we do have a designer, and he was the great creator. When you get a family together, they can at least discuss and talk and get support. And that's why services are quite important.
Well, it is so very important to honor those who are lost. Thank you so much, Graham, for sharing this with us.
All righty.
Hetrick Bittner Funeral Home offers many opportunities for you to learn about the benefits of pre-planning. Simply check out HetrickBittnerFuneralHome.com. Stay with us. We are back right after the break.
Welcome back to Morning Light. Boy, what a week it has been. You know, sometimes when we're talking about the news, it almost demands that we pick a side or have an opinion. Was Jimmy Carter a good president or a bad one? Should we change the name of the Gulf of Mexico? Who should be fired or resign because of the wildfires in Los Angeles? We have all of these questions in the minutes. Maybe we start a debate sometimes in search of a topic, kind of like a fighter waiting for anyone to step into the ring. You see, one of the reasons we do Morning Light is to remind you and ourselves that we can always find reasons to get mad or angry. But if we're followers of Jesus, Christians, we can read every one of those anxiety-driving headlines with a heavy dose of hope, always hope. We don't always have to pick a fight or join the fight, because ultimately, God, Jesus, has won the biggest battle of all. For Deborah and the entire Morning Light team, I'm Jeff Coleman. Thanks for watching this week. Be sure to check on your neighbors this weekend. God willing, we'll see you again right here Monday morning.